Chauffeurs who drive around rich people. What are some of the weird, shocking conversations you have overheard? Picked up a wedding party bride, bridesmaid, and bride's boyfriend who was paying for the wedding. They had a magnum of champagne and we drove around for quite some time while they snorted cocaine in the back. They were using rolled up 50s and 20s, then tossing them to me in the front seat as tip money. I dutifully brushed off each bill and added them to my wallet, pretending not to know what was going on. The couple argued off and on about showing up to the wedding. Apparently she felt weird about getting married and he was trying to convince her it was a good idea. Finally dropped them off at the church and he slipped me a matchbook with his name and number written on it. Yeah, it was the late 80s and I was a young woman, one of the only female limo drivers at the time in that city. Scored a sweet leather jacket with the tips from that night. So many weird stories. Edit: boyfriend and groom were not the same person. I once worked at a really exclusive club in Massachusetts, the kind you have to be born into and or have generational wealth to be voted into membership by the board. One Drew Barrymore was a frequent guest and there was always a lot of tension between her and her ex who always came with his extremely young new GF wife. She wasn't super friendly, no one was supposed to acknowledge they recognized her, seemed constantly stressed, and I felt kind of bad for her. Didn't seem like a fun life. Mitt Romney, Morgan Freeman, and a bunch of big-time athletes were also frequent guests. Someone got married at our club and spent over $2 million on the wedding. They flew out the event planners for Coachella to design every aspect of the wedding. It was a spectacular wedding and one of the most fun nights I've ever had. However, at the end of the night, the front desk saw the groom go home with one of the bridesmaids instead of the bride. I helped set up and cater this one member's garden party, a casual affair for them that must have cost tens of thousands. They had a well-known music group come play for their guests and I got to play cornhole with said group during the luncheon, which was pretty cool. For so many wealthy kids with rich kid problems and wildly different upbringings, parents would constantly talk and quiz their kids on politics, history, science, etc. One group of guys was challenging their teenage sons to come up with a business idea. The boy with the best idea would receive $1 million for startup costs. Kids talked stocks constantly at the dinner table. Teenagers would come to eat with their friends, drink, and drop a casual $15,000 bill on their parents' tab. Just such a stark contrast from the way I was raised, where money was taboo topic and my weekly $2 allowance for a week's worth of chores made me feel rich. It was a small island with an equally small nightlife, so for fun, we would grab a drink and an ice cream cone and hop on the yachts and sailboats parked at the docks. We'd explore and pretend we were sailors or captains for the night. Once we hopped on Johnny Depp's super yacht while he was out at dinner. We actually managed to hang out for a hot minute before security finally kicked us off. While looking for a tennis partner, I met this truly lovely couple who basically adopted me. I would bike to their house to play matches on their backyard tennis court every day. They loved to take me out to eat at these incredible restaurants. As a foodie, I was in heaven. They let me drive their cars on the beach, use their surfboards, drive their jet ski. I ran out of gas in the middle of the ocean and had to get rescued by the Coast Guard. Took me out on their yacht every weekend, and even flew me out on their private jet to nearby islands to explore in the morning and would then fly me back in time for my job at the club. They were the most kind and wonderful people and never asked for anything but my company in return. I think they missed their daughters who both lived out of state. I fell out of touch with them, but I think of them often and hope they're doing well. When we were in high school, my friend used to caddy at a local country club. One guy really liked him and asked if he would be willing to drive him around while he went out partying. This was like 2003 and in a pretty rural area. My friend agreed. He picked the guy up at like 8 p.m. Right off the bat, the guy handed him $200. He went to a bar for a little bit. My friend sat in the car. The guy came out, handed him another $200 and told him he had to visit his friend real quick. He went and got a bunch of coke. They went to another bar. He handed my friend another $100 and told him to look out the window and turn up the radio. He then blew several lines. He came out a couple hours later with a girl he was married with kids. He handed my friend another $200 and they went back to her house. After they ducked, He came out and asked to be taken to the beach. At this point it was like 2-3 a.m. My friend said that the guy slowly walked around the beach, went into the water up to his ankles and his shoes, threw a bunch of rocks into the water and then sat in the sand for about 45 minutes. He came back to the car and asked to be driven home. When they got out of the car he hugged my friend and gave him $500 and asked him to never tell anyone what happened. None of us really believed my friend when this happened until the guy he drove got arrested for assault and possession of cocaine like 6 months later. I used to know a chauffeur. He ended up driving around some big stars. He was big dude, like 6'8" and super muscular. His best story was when he was driving around a few WWE WWF back then stars, and they awkwardly asked him to not get out and open the door for them because he'd make them look smaller. Friend of mine worked for an upscale concierge chauffeur service. His most memorable moment came when he lost Marie Osmond. Fairly simple gig: go to airport and pick up Marie Osmond, who was to be the featured entertainer at a private event. Plane comes in, he meets her. She has carry-on bag but her checked suitcase, containing her stage dresses and makeup, is missing. She is unflappable, though, asks to be taken to the nearest upscale mall. He does as instructed. She goes into a large upscale department store, selects 2 long sequin cocktail dresses and goes to the fitting room to try them on without him, of course. Unfortunately, there are 2 entrances and exits to the fitting room, and Marie Osmond exits out through the other side and cannot find my chauffeur buddy, who is waiting patiently on the side she'd entered. 20 minutes passes. He thinks something has gone wrong, so he grabs a female manager and asks her to go into the fitting rooms and ask for Marie Osmond. The manager thinks she is being pranked and declines. Chauffeur buddy is in mini panic mode now, running wildly around the store asking random customers, "Have you seen Marie Osmond? Have you seen Marie Osmond?" Store security is summoned and he is asked to leave the premises right now. He calls his employer and tells them he has lost Marie Osmond. The employer doesn't have her cell phone number but has her agent's number and he is not accepting calls. She has in the meantime taken a cab to the gig, thinking she has been forgotten. Lots of apologies eventually ensued and there were no repercussions. Buddy of mine ended up picking up a Netflix producer while doing Uber. He said they had a great conversation as he brought him to his hotel. The producer invited him up for a drink and since my friend was a film student he thought it'd be a good idea to go and try to get some good networking in. They hung out for about an hour when he asked my friend if he knew of any massage places with happy endings. He didn't, but the guy paid him $500 to bring him to the closest massage place, which was only a few miles out. Upon dropping him off he gave my buddy a card and said, "There's a big party festival I am hosting. That's your ticket in. I'll let you know then if I get that happy ending." Laughing, he got the happy ending. I used to drive limousine and taxi. One time I got the manager of a fairly famous Canadian band in my car asking me where to buy coke. I had no idea where and I told him that, so his bright idea was to find a prostitute, hire her and ask her. I told him I couldn't help him pick up prostitutes either. He was disappointed but understood. He had me drive down a well-known street until he saw a prostitute. He asked me to pull over, got out of the taxi, paid the fare, and then immediately flagged me down again as a new ride. I knew what was up, but whatever. He gets back into the car with the prostitute and she tells him exactly what house to go to for some coke. I take them there and wait a bit. They come back out and I drive him back to the venue. Then he offers me 2 free tickets to the show, which I gladly accepted as love that band and had seen them 3 times. Alas, since I was still working during the show, I gave them away to 2 friends who had never seen the band. They had a good time and I had a fun story to share with them about how I scored those tickets. Not really a shocking conversation and hardly a famous person, but it was interesting how easily and full of trust people can be about searching out and buying drugs in a strange city. For the record, this was 2003. My dad was a chauffeur when I was younger, and he told me of one story driving the director of a company down the road with the Blackpool illuminations in the company limousine. The director was standing up out of the sunroof with his arms out waving at people as he drove past. What the people on the street didn't know is that in the back of the limo there were two prostitutes blowing him. He thought I couldn't speak French, heard him telling his wife on the telephone where she should order a strippin'. Not a conversation and not me, but definitely weird, shocking and disgusting. A friend of mine who worked in music was in a limo with Robin Thicke and a load of dancers and models driving around London. They're all just chatting and whatnot, and out of nowhere, Robin Thicke just starts going down on one of the models. There was an awkward split-second silence, and then everyone just carried on and ignored it. I've had multiple people pay me handsomely to let them smoke weed in the car. Heard a French guy yelling at his wife that $10,000 was too much to pay for 2 bracelets that she bought. Also overheard a lot business deals with absurd amount of money referenced, like tens of millions. This is not a limo story, but this thread reminded me of a rich guy story. My daughter played soccer for many years, and at one practice, a guy drove up in a Ferrari, got out, and started talking to another of the dads on the team. After a few minutes, the guy left and another of the dads went over there and asked him who that guy was. He replied that the guy was his lawyer or something. I come to find out years later that that guy in the Ferrari was a multimillionaire, had one and only one client, that dad, and his only job was to handle the dad's charitable donations. So this dude got filthy rich donating millions of dollars of somebody else's money and taking a percentage off the top. The dad, who was apparently worth several $100 million, never came across as rich at all. He wore sweats too and was at every practice and game. He drove a Camry, had been married to his average-looking wife for like 25 years. Stuff like that. Acted like a normal guy like the rest of us. Drove L.I.M.O. at Marquette University during undergrad and grad school. Some of the students that went there were obscenely wealthy. Limos are the vans that drive drunk students anywhere on campus and a few blocks outside of campus. Couple things I remember randomly from it. One drunk guy leaves his wallet on a van and another driver calls it in so me and another supervisor can take it to campus police. We pick up the wallet from the driver and open it to get the student ID so they know who to email. There had to be a few grand in there, and when we called the kid to tell him about it, he told us we could just keep it because it was too far from his dorm to bother picking up. K2 I picked up a couple girls from AKIO and they spent the entire ride talking about how it was ridiculous that one of the girls' parents planned on making her pay for her own apartment after graduation, and there was nothing even livable under $2K a month. The school is in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. 3 Mardi Gras is the name of a campus ministry trip where you use your spring break to build houses and drink 'em somewhere that doesn't get snow in April. One of the people on my van was getting a free night of drinks from his buddies because he paid for everyone's trips. I think it was like $1,500 per person if I remember correctly. 4 rich kids are rich, but foreign rich kids are usually on a different level. Was talking to a guy from Spain who said his dad did something with movies over there. I don't know. He had an actual Rolex on and ended the conversation with, "So anyways, do you know where to find any meth?" 5 It is a free service, and a frat star tried to pay me for the ride with a Ziploc baggie of cocaine. I said no and he called me a legend and left a 20 in the cup holder before I realized it. One of my best friends used to drive Uber in a wealthy area of LA. He told me so many stories about drunk celebs and TikTokers in his car. Someone offered him a bag of weed because they felt sorry for their friend throwing up in the back seat. Most people were just normal though. Some highlights: Quentin Tarantino and Trisha Paytas were making out in his backseat when they were secretly dating, LOL. Mike Tyson is apparently very nice in person and also a giant pothead. Somebody on Gossip Girl and her friend were arguing about chicken nuggets and tried to get him to go through a Wendy's drive-thru during the lunch rush when there were 10 cars already in line. Addison Rae or one of her friends took their shoes off and left them in the car. Leo DiCaprio took more than 5 minutes to find the car. He seemed out of it and was quietly bobbing his head listening to music on his headphones. Wasn't exactly a chauffeur, but I did have the distinguished privilege of working with a multimillionaire one time for a couple days, and I was just astounded at how out of touch he was with people. One conversation he was talking about how he hated all the new homes they were building and he liked old castles, so he was having a castle in Scotland disassembled and reassembled here in the US piece by piece. On another occasion he asked me why I wasn't in college yet. The job was after high school and I was working as a plumber, and gave me a no right when I told him I couldn't afford to go yet and had to save up. Not a chauffeur, but seemed like a good chance to remind people of the story of John Boehner at the time. Speaker of the U.S. House of Representatives, third in line for the U.S. presidency, not knowing how to use Uber. As the story goes, one of his aides downloaded the app onto his phone and showed him how to use it. Unknown to him, he'd been stuck on the carpooling option, Uber Pool. That's what he used for years. There are all sorts of tales of commuters hopping into their carpool and bam, there's John Boehner stuck in a middle seat asking to get dropped off at the Capitol building. However you feel about his politics, I think that's pretty funny. Consider subscribing if you enjoyed this video and if you want to see more of Reddit Universe.